New York is a majestic city, famous for its skyscrapers. But did you know that this huge metropolis is more than just a noisy, dynamic, and vibrant city of opportunities? It's a city of mysteries and secrets with a whole underground world hidden underneath. To get a good look at everything, let's take a tour of Underground New York. You'll look at millions of wires and hundreds of thousands of cables. See the sewer system and the water supply system, each 3 times the length of the Hudson River. But there is much more to it. What secret passages are there? And who lives in this underworld? Beneath New York lies a vast infrastructure and archaeological wonders. We'll start our behind-the-scenes tour with the layers closest to the surface. Grab your flashlights. We are about to embark on a fascinating journey called What Lies Under New York. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to make sure you don't miss our new videos. In fact, there is also an entire city under the New York streets. But most residents of the upper city don't think about it until something extraordinary happens. Let's cut through this endless layered cake as deep as the Chrysler Building and explore it inch by inch. At the very top, there is an 8-centimeter, 3-inch layer of asphalt, which is followed by almost 25 centimeters, 10 inches of rough concrete. Beneath that lies the layer of soil. Through another 2.5 to 8 centimeters, 0.8 to 3 inches, there are wires, telephone and electrical, street lighting and fire alarms, as well as cable television. Further down by about 30 centimeters, roughly 1 foot, one can find gas pipelines. Deeper still, at a depth of 1.2 meters, about 4 feet, runs the water supply. Here, let's take a closer look at one of the water sources. In the early 19th century, New York relied on well water, which quickly became polluted. Manhattan Island had the most limited sources of potable water, and some of it had to be transported from Brooklyn by boat. The issue was resolved by constructing a long underground aqueduct, a water pipeline designed to supply water to densely populated areas. The old Croton Aqueduct spans 66 kilometers, 41 miles, and is now the longest abandoned tunnel in New York. Built between 1837 and 1842, the old Croton Aqueduct is a brick-lined tunnel that begins at the Croton Dam, 41 miles north of New York City. It descended into the city through the Bronx and into Manhattan, where it ended at a reservoir located between 42nd and 40th Streets, from 5th to 6th Avenues. However, as water demand grew, it was decided to build a new aqueduct. The new Croton Aqueduct originally complemented the old Croton Aqueduct and was built roughly parallel to it. It opened in 1890, while the old one remained in service until 1955. Today, the northern end of the old aqueduct supplies water to Ossining, while a large section running through the Bronx is completely abandoned. And the sealed Manhattan section, as far as local enthusiasts know, hasn't been inspected since 2008. Let's go back from our tour of the aqueducts to other layers of the underground New York. The water pipes are followed by steam pipes located 1.8 meters, 6 feet underground. Interestingly, these pipes are covered with harmful asbestos, a material widely used in the 20th century for construction, including pipe insulation. However, it was later discovered that asbestos poses significant health risks, causing respiratory diseases and even cancer. As a result, the use of asbestos for insulation has been phased out. But of the 103 miles of steam lines across 96th Street in Manhattan, approximately 90% are still coated in the carcinogenic fiber. Another concern is that replacing them all at once could release even more asbestos into the air. Therefore, asbestos pipes are currently replaced only after accidents or as part of maintenance. Beneath New York City lies not just a physical network, but also a latent health hazard to its residents. Yet, deeper still lies an even more unexpected structure. These are also pipes, but they look kind of weird. Neither water nor sewage flows through them, nor are they used for cables. What are they for? The answer will surprise many. They were once used for mail services. Let's now shift our focus to them. This is a pneumatic mail, which is also located only 1.8 meters, 6 feet underground. Is this your first time hearing about it? Nonetheless, it actually functioned for quite a while, and not just anywhere, but near New York. Pneumatic mail emerged as an integral part of urban infrastructure in the mid-20th century in London, then in Manchester and other British cities, followed by Paris. In the USA, it first appeared in Philadelphia in 1893, and then reached New York in 1897. What did it look like? Imagine 43 kilometers, 27 miles of pipes buried 1.2 to 1.8 meters, 4 to 6 feet beneath the city streets, connecting 23 post offices. Capsule containers with letters, that is, steel cylinders weighing 11 kilograms, 25 pounds each, and 53 or 61 centimeters, 21 or 24 inches long, zipped through them at a speed of 56 kilometers per hour, 35 miles per hour. Their diameter was 18 or 20 centimeters, 7 or 8 inches respectively. The compressor pumped air into the pipe, which pushed the capsules to their destination. They were marked on the outside with their final destination, but they all had to pop up at each station along the way. If the capsule was meant for another station, it was sent back into the tube to continue its journey. Each capsule could contain up to 600 letters. At its peak, the system delivered 95,000 letters a day, accounting for 30% of all city mail. What were the benefits? Mail arrived at any time, in any weather, regardless of the regular traffic. It seemed so promising that there were even dreams of once equipping every apartment with a pneumatic mail. At the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, there were even proposals to extend pneumatic mail pipes across the Atlantic, connecting America and Europe. The system's operators were known as rocketeers. One Postal Service veteran recalls that the containers popped out of the pipes about once a minute and were slightly warm and lubricated. But it's worth noting that not all letters were sent this way. First of all, first-class correspondence traveled underground. Regular letters were sent the old-fashioned way, by horse-drawn wagon. By the way, the system was created not by government authorities, but by private companies, which were paid rent by the city. Installing pneumatic mail pipes wasn't an easy task, as existing sewage and gas pipes limited the size and thus the volume and type of mail that could be transported underground. The level of groundwater posed another challenge. The Miracle Post Office ceased operations in 1953. But not for the reasons you might expect. Firstly, the cost of renting the pipes turned out to be exorbitant. Secondly, cars appeared and quickly ceased to be a curiosity. At the same time, although cars were generally slower than the capsules, they could carry more letters and were cheaper to operate. Thirdly, any relocation of a post office meant that the pavement had to be opened up and the pipes relayed. Would you like to send a letter this way? You must admit, that's at least unusual. Share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's delve deeper. Below us lie the most unusual tunnels, which, according to various sources, were located 1.5 to 6 meters, 5 to 20 feet underground. In the 19th century, the western part of Manhattan, around 35th Street, was known for its slaughterhouses. As the city's population grew and cars became more and more prevalent, the movement of cattle through the streets began to cause significant traffic problems. According to legend, people solved this problem by building underground cattle tunnels under 12th Avenue, now known as the West Side Highway and 34th Street. However, the exact locations and construction materials of these tunnels have long been a topic of debate and speculation. In 2004, an archaeological report shed light on the legendary cattle tunnels at 34th and 38th Streets used by West Side slaughterhouses. An official document from 1932 confirmed the existence of a 61-meter-long cattle passage. Even earlier, in 1975, the New York Times also mentioned a similar tunnel. Today, the only cows you'll find in Manhattan are all art pieces. Next, we'll explore another tunnel, which certainly exists without any doubt. It lies at only 5 meters, 17 feet underground. First, let's delve into some historical context. It's widely known that the world's first subway system was launched in London in 1863. But did you know that New York might have a legitimate claim to this title? The Brooklyn Historic Railway Association states that the world's first underground railroad tunnel was constructed in 1844, stretching beneath Atlantic Avenue from Bowrum Place to Columbia Street. Initially, this was not an underground construction. The railway track was initially established as an open passageway and put into operation on December 3, 1844. 5 years after its opening, a ceiling was added to the passage, turning it into a tunnel. This structure measured 5.2 meters, 17 feet in height, extended 767 meters, 2,517 feet in length, and was 6.4 meters, 21 feet wide. Historically, it became the oldest underground railway tunnel in the world and earned a place in the Guinness Book of Records. Built nearly 40 years before the opening of the Brooklyn Bridge, this subway was the final step toward connecting Boston with New York City by continuous rail service. The project satisfied both investors who aimed to develop the region and residents who wished to preserve its beauty. However, a significant issue soon emerged. Sparks and clouds of smoke shot out of the ventilation shafts onto the avenue above. In 1859, after residents' numerous complaints, a New York court banned coal and wood-burning locomotives from entering Brooklyn. Thus, this New York subway was discontinued, failing to reach even 20 years of operation. But the tunnel continued to captivate the minds of New Yorkers. It was rumored that Prohibition-era bootleggers, World War II spies, gangsters, and giant water rats found refuge within its walls. The tunnel remained shrouded in fascinating legends. Everything changed in 1980 when Bob Diamond, a 20-year-old engineering student passionate about trains, discovered a manhole at Atlantic Avenue and Court Street. He ventured to crawl 21 meters, 70 feet underground through a buried section of the tunnel, less than 0.6 meters, less than 2 feet high, and found a wall covering the main part of the tunnel. Then, with the help of an engineering crew from Brooklyn Union Gas Company, he broke through a massive concrete partition. So, the tunnel found a second life. The discovery was followed by 8 months of persistent research and digging through city records. But more than the tunnel, Diamond was interested in an abandoned 1830s steam locomotive, which he believed was sealed behind the far wall. City officials reacted positively to his idea of establishing a museum within the tunnel. In 1982, Diamond started guiding public tunnel tours and founded the Brooklyn Historic Railway Association that same year. By the 21st century, the area above the tunnel had changed significantly from when Diamond made his discovery. and it was shocking when city officials closed his business in 2010 due to safety concerns. Diamond's disappointment is easy to understand, mainly because the popularity of the tunnel tour has only increased over 30 years. Hundreds of curious visitors passed through the manhole in the middle of Atlantic Avenue every week. Rooftop Films hosted screenings in the tunnel, launching series such as Trapped in the Tunnel and Tunnel of Love. National Geographic planned to make a documentary about this place. The research inside the tunnel suggested that a large metal object, possibly the rumored locomotive, might be behind the far wall. However, this growing interest resulted in suspending the tours following recommendations from the fire department and the city of New York, banning Diamond from the tunnel. However, for a long time, the man did not lose hope of returning inside one day. Today, its entrance from Atlantic Avenue remains sealed. In 2014, the owners of Chez Moi Restaurant at 135 Atlantic discovered the outside of the tunnel behind the basement wall during renovations and after a good whack with a sledgehammer. This space became part of the Le Boudoir Bar, intriguing customers with this part of Brooklyn history. A fitting tribute, considering illegal whiskey producers were rumored to hide in the tunnel. By the way, speaking about illegal activities, a little lower, just 6 meters, 20 feet underground, there are tunnels where real bloody massacres occurred. Doyer Street in New York's Chinatown is a small historical street that spans only 60 meters, 200 feet. Today it's home to some of New York's favorite shops and restaurants. The street was once known as the Bloody Angle, due to its violent history in the 19th century. The fact is that the curvilinear Doyer Street allowed the bandits to sneak up on each other unnoticed. Having completed their bloody business, the criminals presumably fled into the network of tunnels under Chinatown. Let's take a look at one of them. For reference, locate the Apothecary Bar. The entrance to the tunnel is next to it. It leads to Chatham Square. Now, let's travel back in time to 1909 within this tunnel. Look, actor Ah Hoon is being escorted from the Chinese theater that used to be at 57 Doyer Street. He has repeatedly mocked a rival gang in his speeches, understanding that his days were numbered. He made it safely through the tunnel to his apartment, but was shot at night on the landing. Indeed, this block was once rocked by the Tonggang War, the fierce conflict between Chinese factions in Chinatown. Some authors believe that the violence eventually subsided due to the Great Depression, the economic crisis of 1929 to 1939. Yet, it's rumored that Bloody Corner witnessed more violent deaths than any other intersection in America. Are you spooked already? Let's shift our focus from the tunnel to a ship. And no, we're not going to the surface. Rest assured, there's no risk of seasickness here. This ship was discovered underground, 6 to 9 meters, 20 to 30 feet below the surface. In 2010, an astonishing discovery was made in Lower Manhattan, New York. Deep beneath the World Trade Center site, archaeologists unearthed the remains of a wooden ship. What was it doing there? Keep watching and find out. According to new research, the ship was built from wood harvested from old forests in southeastern Pennsylvania around 1773. Remarkably, Independence Hall and other Revolutionary-era buildings in Philadelphia were built from wood harvested around the same time and in the same area, according to Edward Cook, a tree ring researcher at Columbia University in New York. The vessel, a sailing ship known as a sloop, was likely constructed in a small Philadelphia shipyard soon after the timber was harvested. It is believed that after being in use for about 20 years, the ship traveled to Lower Manhattan, where it was sunk, either intentionally or accidentally. It ended up buried under debris and other materials used to expand Manhattan's shoreline. How did scientists find out the date of ship construction? Cook and his team analyzed the growth rings of white oak planks used in the ship's frame. The youngest ring, formed in the year the timber felled, dates back to 1773, the same year the Bostonians held their famous Tea Party. Cook and his colleagues suggested that the ship was built at a small shipyard in Philadelphia, since the wood had the same sequence of growth rings. Large shipyards obtained wood from different places with different growing conditions, resulting in less uniform ring patterns. The area in Lower Manhattan where the ship was found was filled in during the 1790s, so it likely served its owner no more than 10 or 20 years. It is also believed that the wood could have been infected with shipworms, which shortened its service life. Can we still find the ship at the same place? No, because it was taken to the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Laboratory. Perhaps one day, the sailboat will end up in a New York museum. But for now, let's leave the underground Manhattan for a while and move to Brooklyn, where we go even deeper to discover a real cheese kingdom. We bet you associate underground New York with anything but cheese. But things are more interesting than you think. For many years, thousands of pounds of delicious cheese ripened right beneath Brooklyn. In 1849, a brewery opened at the intersection of Bergen Street and Franklin Avenue. In 1866, the owners built an ice house and a tunnel connecting it to the brewery, although this place has a whole network of tunnels. Until May 2022, this brewery building was home to Crown Finish Caves, a cheese aging company. They used these subterranean spaces to mature their fragrant dairy products. The company's cellars maintained a constant temperature of 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the same coolness as it was over a century and a half ago when the Nassau Brewery operated there. The owner once offered cave tours and even hosted concerts. If you ventured 9.1 meters, 30 feet underground, you would have found nearly 11,800 kilograms, 26,000 pounds of cheese at various stages of aging on the shelves. However, the company was closed in 2022. Who knows what will happen in these basements in the future? Unfortunately, currently, there's nothing here. So let's leave this place for now and go back to Manhattan, where the tunnels of Columbia University await us at a depth of 15 meters, 50 feet. They predate the campus itself. Before Columbia University, between West 116th and 120th Streets, there was the Bloomingdale Insane Asylum, one of the first mental health institutions in the country. The tunnel system underneath was reportedly used by staff to move patients between buildings. When Columbia University acquired the property in the 1890s, it demolished most of the asylum, except for the administrative office and tunnels. As the university expanded over the years, so too did the tunnels, which were repurposed to provide heating and cooling to new buildings. By the early 20th century, these tunnels connected almost the entire campus and became popular passageways. During the Manhattan Project, that is, the U.S. program to develop nuclear weapons from 1942 to 1946, the tunnels were utilized by Columbia scientists to transport radioactive materials between buildings. They were also used to transport supplies during student protests. Over the decades, student interest in tunnels has increased dramatically. The game of Capture the Flag, where teams had to capture the enemy's flag, became a craze in the early 2000s and spread to tunnels. Today, the oldest section of the tunnels has been filled in. The introduction of magnetic locks in the mid-2000s has also significantly restricted student access. In 2008, the cyclotron in Pupin's basement, a key device in the Manhattan Project, was dismantled. symbolizing the final demise of the tunnel system. As of 2013, there have been no officially confirmed tunnel entrances. But according to some reports, you can still go down there from the Butler, the Math Building, Havemeyer, and Lewisson. Now, brush off your clothes as we proceed to another historic site, City Hall. This will be a real journey through time. Don't worry, you won't get arrested for trespassing. Here's your ticket. They sell out very quickly, so you're in luck. We're now stepping back into early 20th century New York. The subway station beneath City Hall in Lower Manhattan opened in 1904. Closed in 1945, it has since become popular among urban explorers. Remember when we said the first subway was actually built in 1844 under Atlantic Avenue? So the second underground public transport system was designed in 1870 by inventor, publisher, and lawyer Alfred Eli Beach. He called it the Beach Pneumatic Transit. Beach actually built another prototype of the subway. It took him 58 days and $350,000 of his own money, about $6.2 million in today's dollars, to construct the tunnel. The first passengers were people brave enough to travel this unusual route and wealthy enough to pay 25 cents, which is 5 times what the future subway would cost. Beach's prototype was a success and proved that underground transportation was not only possible, but could be popular. The inventor lost his funding during the recession of 1873, and his tube was sealed off and forgotten until 1912. It was then accidentally unearthed by workers constructing the R line. The tunnel and the carriage were destroyed. Meanwhile, people continued to rely on trains, and the most sophisticated railway construction methods were found. The first elevated railroad opened in New York in 1868, but the blizzard of 1888 exposed its flaws. Nearly 0.6 meters, 2 feet of snow buried the unprepared city, trapping 15,000 New Yorkers on elevated trains, some for as long as 24 hours. It became clear that we needed proper underground transportation, as it was more reliable and safer. And in 1900, the private Interborough Rapid Transit Company, IRT, began constructing another subway station and completed it in 1904. On its opening day, 150,000 people passed through the old City Hall station, which accommodated 5-car trains. The New York Transit Museum later named it the Jewel in the Crown. Designed by renowned architects Hines and Lafarge, the station featured brass light fixtures, wrought iron chandeliers, and 3 skylights adorned with Guastavino tiles, setting it apart from other stations. On the first trip, a group of dignitaries led by Mayor George McClellan traveled 14.6 kilometers, 9.1 miles, through 28 stations. Tickets were sold at the box office for 5 cents, a fare that remained unchanged until 1948, when it was raised to 10 cents. However, the first trip was too much to take for some people. They bought tickets, but never tried to board the train. They just stood on the platform and marveled at the miracle of modern engineering. Yet, the station wasn't without its issues. The cramped conditions and crowded spaces soon attracted criminals. In fact, the station had not been open for even 15 minutes before someone had already been robbed. Despite these challenges, the benefits far outweighed the drawbacks, with 1 million passengers using the station in its first week alone. Over time, as the nearby Brooklyn Bridge Express station grew more popular, passenger traffic at City Hall Station began to decline. In the last year of its operation, only 600 people a day passed under the station's richly decorated arches. The station was closed permanently in 1945, but it is still considered an active part of the metro system. Train number 6 turns around here approximately once every 8 minutes. There are 472 subway stations in New York. Tunnels vary in depth but are typically 9 to 36 meters, 30 to 120 feet below street level. And New York's deepest station, 191st Street, is 53 meters, 173 feet underground. Is there anything deeper than this? Indeed there is. For example, sewer pipes are typically found at depths from several tens of centimeters, tens of inches, as seen along the Lexington Avenue line, to as deep as 18 floors below, like at St. Nicholas Avenue. Further down, in the most remote reaches of the underground, at depths of 60 to 243 meters, 200 to 800 feet, lie 3 critical water tunnels. These tunnels are integral to New York's water supply system, one of the largest and most complex in the world. Tunnel number 1, opened in 1917, is the oldest of the 3 and spans more than 112 kilometers, 70 miles. For many decades, it was the city's main water supply. It flows from reservoirs upstate through the Bronx, Manhattan, and Queens, ensuring a steady water supply. Water Tunnel number 2, constructed in 1936, serves as an additional line to Tunnel number 1. It extends approximately 97 kilometers, 60 miles, and passes under the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. The tunnel increases the reliability of the water supply system and offers a backup during repairs or emergencies in Tunnel number 1. But the most ambitious is Water Tunnel number 3, the largest capital construction project in New York's history. Upon completion, it will exceed 97 kilometers, 60 miles in length. Project 3 is designed to provide the city with a critical third link to the city's water supply, allowing for the first-time closure and maintenance of Tunnels 1 and 2. Construction began in 1970, but some parts of the tunnel have been operational since 1998 and 2013. The remaining sections will be completed by 2032. This means the construction of the tunnel will have spanned more than 50 years. Now, it's time to go closer to the surface. There are a few more legendary sites we need to explore. Our journey will take us through popular buildings and parks in New York, or more precisely, what lies beneath them. First on our list is the catacombs of the Basilica of St. Patrick's Old Cathedral. It was in this basilica that Francis Ford Coppola filmed the baptism scene in The Godfather. Let's take the stairs to see where the catacombs begin. These are the only Catholic catacombs in Manhattan and also serve as an entire underground cemetery. Unlike the ancient catacombs of Paris and Rome, you won't find scattered bones here. Instead, as you walk along the dimly lit 37-meter, 120-foot long corridor of the crypt, you'll learn about the famous people buried here. Take, for instance, the final resting place of General Thomas Eckert, a confidant of Abraham Lincoln. The walls here were tiled by engineer and builder Raphael Guastavino, famous for his work at Grand Central Station. There are also original Thomas Edison lamps. Remarkably, these catacombs remain active in the 21st century, offering cremation niches for sale. To date, over 350 niches have been filled, and hundreds more are being built and sold on a first-come, first-served basis. The issue price is from $10,000 to $15,000. Having explored this impressive place, it's time for us to move on to the aptly named Freedom Tunnel, located beneath Riverside Park. It has long been an integral part of New York. This tunnel is owned by the Amtrak Railroad Company. Its entrance is a mere 5-minute walk from 125th Street, terminating at a fence-like barrier. The tunnel extends approximately 4.2 kilometers, 2.6 miles from 72nd to 124th Streets. But we don't recommend trying to get into it because, as we said earlier, it's private property. The tunnel was built in the 1930s by Robert Moses. Over the course of 50 years, it was closed and reopened several times, serving freight trains. In 1980, it was completely shut down. It was not used for its intended purpose for 11 years. During this time, the tunnel turned into a real art gallery. The fact is that it was favored by graffiti artists. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, there was a tent city at the southern end of the tunnel with illegal electricity and hundreds, perhaps thousands of residents. They were known as mole people and lived in a tunnel trying to avoid New York's crime-ridden streets of the 1980s. Some say that the city and the police actually allowed them to be there, believing that it was safer than wandering the streets. The tunnel's name is partly linked to these people. After all, they were looking for shelter and the freedom to live without rent or supervision from law enforcement. In 1991, the tunnel was reopened to trains when Amtrak purchased it, leading to a mass eviction. The slum was bulldozed, and the homeless were forced to leave the area. However, graffiti artists and urban explorers continued to visit the tunnel. In the 2000s, they were occasionally caught and removed by the Amtrak Police Department. In late 2009, the company initiated a project to repaint the tunnel, aiming to restore its original look. As a result, many frescoes disappeared, including the central one dedicated to the former tunnel inhabitants. For some reason, the job wasn't completed, and today the freshly painted walls are once again adorned with new layers of graffiti. Take one last look at these artworks before we move on to the next mysterious destination, Track 61. This is a storage track adjacent to a private train platform on the Metro North Railroad in Manhattan. The platform is part of the Grand Central Station complex and is located under the trendy upscale Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Tracks 61 and 63 at Grand Central Terminal were originally built to transport freight and served as loading docks for the steam power plant on 49th Street. When the Waldorf Astoria Hotel acquired the land above these tracks in 1929, it also took ownership of the track below. The outdated steam power plant was demolished along with other buildings on the site. That same year, the New York Times reported that underneath the hotel, there would be a private railroad entrance for guests with private railroad cars. The first person to use this private station was General John Pershing in 1938. According to the New York Times, he arrived in a special railroad car, which was directed to a ramp under the hotel. From there, Pershing accessed an elevator leading up to the hotel. The example of General Pershing shows us that the secret route was indeed used by hotel guests to enter the hotel undetected. But most often, Track 61 is associated with President Roosevelt, who used it in 1944. The report of that day stated that the president would leave the hotel by the same route as he entered it. That is, through the elevator on the east side of Lexington Avenue, and then proceed through the central elevators to the New York Central siding in the hotel's basement. After this, the track became known as the Presidential Siding. A popular myth suggests that Roosevelt's private rail car has been left abandoned on the tracks since 1945. Legend has it that the president would drive his bulletproof Pierce Arrow limousine straight into his personal rail car, which was then transported to Track 61. Once under the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the car would drive out of the rail car onto the platform and be delivered by elevator directly to the hotel. These measures were taken to hide Roosevelt's polio symptoms. However, a 2012 article in Trains magazine clarified that the Waldorf Astoria Hotel did have a car lift. This lift serviced the basement, ground floor, and the first 3 floors, but it wasn't connected to the railway. It was primarily used for transporting cars to the ballroom for events. But in the 21st century, the myth about the abandoned president's carriage was debunked. It turned out to be merely luggage storage, and fitting the Pierce Arrow limousine into it would have been a challenge. The car is now on display at the Danbury Railway Museum. But Roosevelt wasn't the only president associated with Track 61. Every president since Herbert Hoover has stayed in the Waldorf Astoria's presidential suite. Therefore, it is quite plausible that they used a secret entrance. According to an article in the New York Post, this route was used by President George W. Bush's Secret Service, Secretary of State Colin Powell, and National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice. And in 1965, Track 61 made headlines again when American artist and contemporary art star Andy Warhol hosted a party there. Today, it is no longer in use. However, if you're lucky, you might catch a glimpse of this famous track while traveling on the Metro North out of Grand Central Terminal. All right, now it's time to leave the hotel and move to one of the main attractions of New York, Central Park. Did you know that there was once a whole district in its place? Who lived there? Where did these people go? And what was uncovered during the excavations? Before Central Park's creation, the village of Seneca, primarily an African-American community, occupied the area from West 82nd to West 89th Street. The village existed from 1825 to 1857 and had 225 residents by 1855. Of these, approximately 2/3 were African American and the rest were Irish and German immigrants. The village's formation began in 1825 when local landowners John and Elizabeth Whitehead divided their land into 200 lots and sold some of them. The first 3 lots were purchased for $125 by Andrew Williams, a 25-year-old African-American shoe shiner. Epiphany Davis, a store clerk, bought another 12 lots for $578, and the AME Zion Church acquired 6 more. This is how the community was born. From 1825 to 1832, the Whiteheads sold about half of their land to other African Americans. As a result, by the early 1930s, there were about 10 houses in the village. By the mid-1850s, it had expanded to 50 houses. At its peak, the village had 3 churches, 2 schools, and 3 cemeteries. In the mid-19th century, many New Yorkers perceived those who lived in Seneca Village as poor people living in shacks, unaware that many of them were landowners. The residents, primarily African Americans, worked as laborers or in various services. Also, most of their children attended school. That is, compared to other African Americans living in New York City, Seneca Village residents were significantly more prosperous and therefore legally eligible to vote. Back then, the U.S. still had property qualifications for voting. Notably, of the 100 black New Yorkers eligible to vote in 1845, 10 lived in the village of Seneca. However, in the early 1850s, city officials began planning a large municipal park to offer New Yorkers a recreational space. In 1853, the New York State Legislature passed a law that set aside 314 hectares, 775 acres in Manhattan, from 59th to 106th Streets between 5th and 8th Avenues, to create the first large public park in the country. As a result, the residents of the Seneca Village had to leave their homes. To this day, we don't know where they went. Despite its short history of just 32 years, Seneca Village was a close-knit community, a beacon of stability during turbulent times. You probably thought that we were done with dungeons. Well, we aren't. And you're about to get a little wet because we're going to find out if anyone lives under New York City. Rumors have it that some creatures definitely inhabit its underworld. And no, we're not talking about ordinary rats, but alligators. Stories about these sewer-dwelling creatures are mostly fictional and date back to the late 1920s and early 1930s. The New York Times reports that the city rescues about 100 alligators annually. Rescues from whom? Well, from people. Some are confiscated from homes where they're kept as illegal pets. Interestingly, in the USA, You can legally purchase an alligator online with a permit, provided it's still small. However, some unconscientious people keep these reptiles at home illegally, often turning their lives into torture. Of course, some of them try to escape. Although such escapees can survive for a short time in the New York sewers, they will not last long there for obvious reasons, due to low temperatures and bacteria in the sewage. Sewer maintenance crews confirm that there's no underground alligator population. However, the sewer alligator story was very popular in the 1930s, evolving over several decades and becoming another urban legend. Some even believe that this is a hoax created by Teddy May, who was the commissioner of sewers at the time. His interviews laid the groundwork for the first published accounts of these reptiles in the tunnels. This topic has captivated New Yorkers to such an extent that they even established a special day, February 9th, which became known as Alligators in the Sewers Day in Manhattan. Is this story totally made up? How could alligators really get into the sewer? In the mid-20th century, gift shops in Florida sold live baby alligators in small aquariums. New York tourists, charmed by these tiny creatures, often brought them home. However, as the alligators grew larger and began to cause problems, some cruel owners flushed these animals down the toilet. Or, according to Sewer Commissioner May, not into the toilet, but into the storm drains. Some versions go further and claim that after spending so much time in such conditions and complete darkness, alligators grew up blind and lost their pigment, turning albino. This subject has also captivated writers. In all kinds of fiction, characters also often release animals into the street or wash them down the drain. And the 1980 film Alligator features a giant mutant alligator, a victim of toxic chemical waste. Recently, some real-life incidents have proven that such legends are not always myths. In 2010, New York police caught a baby alligator 0.6 meters, 2 feet long in a sewer in Queens. By the way, such amazing things happen not only in New York. In 2017, alligators were seen in sewers in Florida. Even more recently, in 2023, Florida workers found a 1.5 meter, 5-foot reptile in a storm pipe. But it's time for us to get back to the surface. We bet you're now looking at the city of skyscrapers with completely different eyes.